Okay, Alderman Muhammad, you may unmute yourself and start the meeting.
Thank you. I would like to call the Education and Youth Matters meeting to order. Mr. Clerk, or Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Ingracia.
Present.
Alderman Gunther.
Here.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Navarro.
Here.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Rice.
Here.
Chairman Muhammad.
Here.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Martin.
Here.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
And
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. 6 present, you have quorum.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please excuse Alderwoman Middlebrook and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Can I get a motion for the approval of the minutes from Wednesday, May 28th, 2020?
I move that we approve the minutes from the May 28th, 2020 meeting.
second.
It's been moved and second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Ingracia.
Aye.
Alderman
Aye.
Gunther.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Chairman Muhammad.
Aye.
6 aye votes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Today's committee hearing will be a discussion with the superintendent, Dr. Kevin Adams, on the recent announcement of school closures. Dr. Adams, you can begin whenever you're ready, sir.
Sorry, do I have the ability to share screen, or do you want to just talk through the plan?
You do have the ability to share a screen.
Give me 1 minute, please.
Take your time, sir.
First of all, good morning, good afternoon, really, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to have a few minutes with you to talk about the plan as it relates to consolidation of schools. I'll go through, spend about 20 minutes walking through the presentation, then taking it from there. Presently, the district started a process really 4 or 5 years ago as we talked about consolidations of schools. In January, February, we listened to over 1,000 participants in 6 town hall meetings. We listened to teachers, principals, community members, parents, as it relates to schools, church members. We talked to a number of persons, listened to over 1,000 persons over a 2 or 3 month period of time. In March, obviously the pandemic occurred, and the board deferred to make any decisions relative to what they had heard and the data that they had collected to October and November. And so the board started having a conversation in October relative to this. Part of the process was, as I indicated before, to listen to a number of parties. We listened to the city of St. Louis as well in terms of the department leads as it relates to SLDC, and also talked to some elected officials as well prior to any decision being made or decisions being made. And there were some guiding principles that we tried to make sure of, and that is what's going to happen as a result of this? What would be the recommendations? This is not just about resource alignment. This is also about upgrading opportunities for kids with a real focus around some things that I'll talk to you about at the end of the presentation. So our process, we looked at a number of factors: enrollment demands, the building condition, the capacity of the building, meaning how the building was utilized, the neighborhood impact, and any kind of special programs that might be in the school. This is the kind of matrix that we used. 25 points were provided, looking at the number of students who lived in the boundary area of the school, the percentage of the students in the school boundary area who chose that school, meaning that you might have 300 kids in that area, but only 100 were actually going to that school because they were making other choices. The percentage of SLPS enrolled who lived in the school boundary area who did not choose the school, the percentage enrolled who lived outside of school boundary who came into the school. Obviously, that's how magnet schools are enrolled, and also a review of the 5 years of student enrollment data, 2014 to 2019. We know we're in a pandemic this year, so we did not even look at the data for this year as relates to enrollment. It was 5 years prior to this year. We also looked at the facility capital action plan. We have a score for every single school. That score takes in the year the school was built, the gross square footage, the building condition, and the 4 areas we look at: excellent, good, fair, and poor. Schools to provide a great level, as I just indicated. A project description of the concerns with the building. Is it a roof? Is it the boiler system that needs to be repaired? So we have a breakdown on that cost. A cost to address a projected description that I just indicated, and the building systems that it might impact, whether that's electrical, heating, all those kinds of things. Again, looking at the capacity, we looked at elementary schools at 75% capacity, not 100, but 75 would be the point of expectation. For middle and high school, and that would be grades 6, 8, 9, 12, that expectation would be 65% utilization or higher utilization. So a school that might have 400, if it's at only 200 students, that's at 50% capacity, will be below the grade that we were looking for. The impact on the neighborhood, there were 4 areas that we looked at in this area. Data on specific support from the City of St. Louis Office of Development, data on specific support from developers, or specific support from elected officials. We would evaluate that information. The population changes over the last 10 years. It indicates 10 years here, but we really looked at 14 years, and I really looked at 20 years, quite frankly, or 19 years. But I only used the 14-year number. The impact of school closures to the overall neighborhood. Will keeping the school open make a difference? Obviously, that answer in all cases would be yes. Unique special programs approved by the Board of Education. If it was a special kind of program in that school that the board approved, and any other kind of innovative programs, and also any kind of special populations that we were targeting in that particular building. This is kind of a breakdown of how it went. And I'll go to the next slide that kind of looks at these numbers here, but we looked at different point totals for different things that occurred, and I won't spend a lot of time here. This can be available for the auditor members if they want to, and I also provided this on the website for the public to look at as well. But it kind of gives a breakdown in every category. You can see 5 points for poor, 10 points for fair, 15 for good, 20 for excellent. As it relates to the capacity, if a school was at 75 to 100, 25 points, the total, the max number, 74 to 50 on the high school side, 18, and you can see what the numbers were for the elementary and middle school side. We looked at 5 points for each one of these areas here: data, specific support from the City of St. Louis, data, specific support from developers, and so the total number here will roll up to be 20, and then any kind of special programs, a maximum of 10 points if it fit in any one of the categories that you see there. This was the analysis that we basically did on every single school. It shows the areas in red are the areas that we use to translate that score to that I just previously looked at. Enrollment over 5-year periods, the total number of students in the boundary. We looked at number 1, 3, 7, the FCAP score, which is the score of the building, the neighborhood development, if there wasn't any population changes from 2000 to 2014, as I indicated here. Close areas, closed schools in that area, we looked at that as well. Per student cost was not an area we looked at, but you can see what that cost would be in any kind of special programs. And at the bottom of the sheet, you can see what the score tabulation was. We also looked at all of the other things you see there, But those were not the things that we looked to score the school on. Those were the things that were additional information that the board could have, and we would have as well to try to make decisions. These are the schools that we looked at. We looked at 23 elementary schools out of our 41 elementary schools, and these are the scores that, as you can see here. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this. I just want to give you some idea that we looked at a number of different schools, and the scores you can see over to your right. The city population changes, as I indicated before, the cost to renovate, the building age. Well, those are things in blue, but not part of the scoring piece, but important things we thought we should have here. Budget analysis is what the cost would be to educate a kid in that particular building. The cost varies because you're talking about personnel costs, and you might have older teachers or younger teachers, and all of those things added together gives you an average cost. These are the elementary schools we looked at. These are the schools that are a continuation of elementary schools that we looked at. There was only one middle school we looked at. We have 8 middle schools, but we only looked at one. All of the other middle schools are mega schools with the exception of one, and their populations are really high. In terms of senior high schools, we looked at these senior high schools, again, for the same rationale that I framed around the middle schools and the schools you see that we looked at. When we added the scores together, you see these scores. We did not necessarily pick every school based on the score. There was some subjective view about that as relates to schools that we selected. There was some rationales for why we looked at schools that you see listed here and not looking at some schools. If we took 2 schools out of the same neighborhood, it would impact the neighborhood. So that's why you might see a school like Laclede still on the list when Ford is the school that we're looking to recommend closing, because Laclede is close to Ford, and it would take 2 schools out of that neighborhood. So we did look at those kinds of things. So it wasn't just driven by a score. It was also based on the environment and the community that the school was in to try to leave some school in that particular neighborhood. Middle schools, you see what the data is relative to middle schools. And high schools, we kind of put those 2 together. Carnahan is a school that we're looking to transition into a middle school because, as I indicated, we have 8 middle schools, 14 high schools, and our middle school population is high compared to our high school population. And we have less schools there. And Carnahan was originally built for a middle school. They turned it into a high school, and so the whole building itself is more geared toward middle and high. As a result of doing all of this, this is what we came up with as the rationale for the things that we wanted to do. Looking at increasing all school budgets. First of all, kids that will be transferred from one school to another school, we are looking to provide them with a recruitment counselor or a specialist to help them go through the process. There's some 2,000 kids that are going to be impacted by these recommendations that you see here, which is about 10% of our population. We were looking to increase all school site budgets, meaning discretionary budgets. Schools right now get a rate of anywhere from $100 to $140 or $50 a student. We're looking to increase those amounts so that schools have discretionary money to spend the way they want to. An increase of that. Additional advanced placement and elective courses offered at every one of our high schools. We have a limited number of those things happening in every single school. Some schools have more than others. We're looking to increase it in every single one of our high schools. Right now, we do not have full-time nurses in every single school. This would allow us to do so. We do not have full-time counselors or social workers in our schools, and it would be either or. We have about 40 social workers right now that provide support to about 68 schools. About 19 schools don't have full-time counselors. They have a counselor 1 day a week or 2 days a week. A lot of that depends on the finances. Some of it also depends on our ability to get people. So security officers at every school. We only have security officers at middle and high schools, none at elementary schools, with the exception of 1 or 2 schools might have 1 officer. Family community specialists, those are the linkages between parents and the schools. Right now, we don't have 1 in every single school. The intent is that we would have 1 in every single school. As a result of this pandemic, we realized the need to look at a K-12 virtual school. And so part of what we are looking to offer families is a K-12 virtual school, knowing that no matter what happens with the vaccine, it is a likelihood that many families are still not going to feel comfortable in August of going to school in person. And so we want to offer them a virtual opportunity. Right now, that virtual opportunity is in 68 schools, and some schools do a better job of doing that as opposed to others. And so this will give us an opportunity to have one entity, one site, one school that provides that K-12 virtual school, which means that an adult will be there virtually providing instruction to our students. Additional reading coaches at all of our selected targeted schools that have low reading scores. And lastly, paid internships for all of our high school seniors. I am reminded from people in the community how this used to happen in St. Louis. And so we're looking to provide all of our seniors with an opportunity in January 2022 with an opportunity to have a paid internship, meaning that that they don't even have to come to school. They could do online school in the second semester before they graduate and have paid internships or paid jobs, if you will, starting in February, March, and April for 3 months. It does two things. It also gets kids ready for the real world, but it also teaches them the soft skills that they need to have. And we're deep in the weeds in terms of planning what that looks like at this point in time. So the timeline is that December 1st, we submitted to the board the recommendations. December 7th, there was a community and staff feedback online. It was some 680 comments that came in. The board received all of those comments. December the 5th, we toured schools, 6 schools. We had the ability to tour. 6 of the 7 board members did tour from about 9 o'clock to about 2:30 on that Saturday, last Saturday. On the 7th, the board received the community feedback. They received that information because we closed it on the 7th. It stayed open a week. The virtual town hall, which occurred on Tuesday night from 6:30 to approximately 9 o'clock. The board has added another date, December the 14th, which is not on here because they voted on it on Tuesday night for another work session with the superintendent and themselves to talk about this. This is an open session. They'll be on, the same venue they've always been on the 14th at 6:30. And then the anticipation is that the board will take a vote on the 15th of December. At this time, Madam President, I can take any kind of questions that the board might have, but that was an abbreviated version, about 20 minutes of what the recommendations are and how we got to where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. If any of the members of the committee have questions, this is your chance to ask. I will start with Alderman Cone.
No questions at the moment. I'll defer my time to our other colleagues.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderwoman Ingracia.
I don't have any questions at this time, Mr. Chairman, but if possible, I'd like to reserve a few minutes after we hear public testimony.
Absolutely, Alderwoman.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Dr. Adams, for being here today. I was a few minutes late due to a technical difficulty. This presentation, will this be available to all of us in the general public?
It is available right now on our website. This is an abbreviated version. I didn't want to take an entire hour, but the whole presentation is presently available online on the district's website. But I can also provide it to you electronically to put on your website if you choose to.
That would be very helpful. Dr. Adams, what we're considering here today, I mean, in these coming days ahead, what the school board is considering doing, with the proposed closure of several schools is so stressful. I appreciate you taking my phone calls over the last couple of days to answer a couple of questions I had. I don't really have a question, but rather maybe just an encouragement that we could maybe think about this. We are experiencing such a stressful time in our history of human beings, and here in the city of St. Louis as part of the nation and the pandemic that we're in. I'm just curious if you could talk about, if there is a pressing need to have this conversation now, or if this may be something we could consider having a longer conversation with the general public about. I know that our budget is constrained in ways that we don't fully understand at this point, but I am a little worried. We are moving somewhat swiftly through this. I know the Board of Aldermen does not have any real say. This is something for the elected school board to decide. I appreciate that we're hearing this right now as an elected leader representing, an area that has 2 proposed school closures. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk directly to you and talk to the general public and hear public testimony today. I am a little bit concerned that we're moving very quickly through this. I recognize that we have some enrollment issues and, we're spending money on buildings that might better be used to support our teachers and education. But I just want to make sure that we're moving through this in as thoughtful way as possible. Can you talk about maybe the timeline here and if there's any possibility or, what this looks like now and what this could look like and why we're kind of maybe moving in this, what seems to be.
Yes, again, this is a process that really started in January. Really started in October of last year, quite frankly, because we had some conversation with the board about the notion that the enrollment was being reduced. More importantly, it was about providing services to kids. And so part of what, and I know this is a very difficult piece, I'm not naive about that, but this is really about trying to free up resources to provide more resources to students in schools. I have an elementary school that has 96 students. It is literally almost impossible to provide a full-time nurse every single day. A nurse is there 1 day a week, a counselor 1 day a week, a social worker 1 day a week. And so I'm shorting kids by not having all the resources necessary to support kids in those environments. The other piece, and I think you alluded to it, and I'll be quite frank about it, we don't know what the property tax are going to be long-term. We just don't know. Obviously, we receive our dollars about 85%, 90% from cities' property tax, and we should be getting those in the next 30 days. And so December, we'll have some idea, but long-term, we don't know what those dollars might look like. We have been very frugal over my period of time as superintendent. We started with a $66 million deficit and now have a surplus, but that surplus can be short-lived if we don't make the kind of decisions that we need to make long-term. The question I would ask is, frankly and honestly, the board is going to make the decision. I make recommendations, the board makes decisions. My question would be outside of the notion around, as you indicated, what's going on in our community, what's going on in our world, frankly, what is going to change from a data perspective relative to the information that we presently have. Every single ward, with the exception of 2, has showed a decline in population over the last 14 years. Some 5,000, some 4,000, those numbers are real numbers. And so we just don't have the same number of kids in the city of St. Louis. 60,000 when I started as superintendent, 45,000 today. A 15,000 student decline in public school students, whether you look at charters or the district, there is a decline. So I'll welcome any suggestion from this group or any group about the notion of slowing down with a purpose, but I've yet to hear a real rationale for doing so that's going to change any of the recommendations that I've made right now. And there may be some, I don't know. I'm welcome. I'm open to hearing any recommendations that might come. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adams. I guess I would, when you talk about the board making a decision, you are referring to the school board and not the board.
Yes, I'm sorry, the school board. Yes, I'm sorry, I apologize, the school board.
And I do appreciate you coming before this committee, considering that we really don't have any say in that process. I see there are several members of the school board here. And so I think this collaboration is helpful, recognizing that we all play an important role here. The proposed closures were made public, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe the first week of December. And I guess my concern would be that the public being able to weigh in such a short a period of time, before that vote being made on the specific schools proposed, you know, is a somewhat short window. And considering that the pandemic here, one concern I do have, you know, just looking at the numbers is, you know, I just want to make sure that there aren't, you know, because of the pandemic, that, you know, looking at students who may or may not be counted or may not be able to participate remotely or that sort of thing.
No,
Just
we're not
making sure
looking,
that the public has.
yeah, we're not looking
Go
at
ahead.
any data from this year at all. No data
Okay.
from this year.
Okay, that is helpful to know. And I don't think I appreciated that fact. But I did want to weigh in that maybe, you know, from my perspective, it would be helpful to have the public have a little longer to weigh in and participate, given that they were recommendations and not a fully, you know, they're not a determination. Given, you know, the nature of the difficulty of reaching people during this time, you know, we're not able to send something home in book bags to parents like we might normally be able to do, or other ways that when we're able to meet in person can be easier and more facilitated for dialogue. So I just wanted to weigh in on that front, Dr. Adams, and I appreciate you listening to my concerns in this way. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chairman.
very
I don't have any further at this time, but I am grateful there's so many members of the public here.
Thank you, Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Wood Morton.
No questions at this time, but I do want to thank Mr. Adams for being here on short notice.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderman Gunther.
Thank you, Chairman Mohammed. I guess, and also thank you, Dr. Adams, for being here. I think I would also like to hear from some of the public testimony, but just real quick, are you going to be able to stay around for additional questions afterwards, Dr. Adams, or?
I have a 2:30. I've cleared my calendar to try to stay on as long as I can.
Okay.
And so, yes, I plan on at least staying at least to 2:30.
Okay. Well, then I'll just really quickly say a few things in case after the public testimony you have to jump off. So I've mentioned this. I've been kind of following the Mondays, the report that you had in front of the school board, and one of the things that you mentioned in that analysis is that you've reached out to the individual alder people whose schools were located within that ward. That's correct, right?
I reached out to all the persons whose schools might be at risk of closing. I was able to contact all of them with the exception of one who left messages. The only person I did not reach out to because the building was not being impacted was the older person for Cleveland, because the building is still remaining open. So all the persons I was able to talk to with the exception of those two.
Okay. Well, I see some heads shaking out there. So, so I guess what I wanted to say about that was that, you know, I think for your analysis that was one step. However, in my ward, the 9th ward, I don't technically have any public schools. However, all of my students go down, most of them to the 20th ward or over the 8th ward, to where my students are actually affected as well by these schools closing. So, you know, kind of echoing what Alderwoman Spencer was saying about, you know, right now you have recommendations that you're slating to vote on next week. But now that we've had 2 weeks to kind of digest, and I think maybe the school board and it might be wise for yourself also to look at some of the wards that have students that go to these schools that maybe don't have the physical building there, as we are affected as well. So the thought of maybe getting a little bit more input and a little broader reach before a vote is taken next week, I think might be important. So I will let the public comment, and if you're still around later, we'll have more questions, I'm sure. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Adams, for your time here today. I know that these are not easy decisions, and I appreciate all the time and consideration that you're giving to this. I don't have any questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Superintendent Dr. Adams, for being here today, and for the Board of Education members that were able to join as well. I think as we as a committee who, obviously don't have any direct jurisdiction over St. Louis Public Schools, are trying to better connect City Hall to the school district, and we know that relationship needs to be strengthened. We need to be working more closely together. I am trying to wrap my head around what kind of the systemic issues of what we're dealing with at the moment. I represent an area that does not have any neighborhood schools left. We have very few neighborhood schools left in the city of St. Louis. We have a lot of magnet schools. We have a lot of charter schools. We have, as of the 2019-2020 school year, it looks like we had more than 12,000 students in St. Louis enrolled in charter schools. And I know you referenced that number of about 14,000 students as a decline. And we're, as a city, we're declining in population, and we have all these really great school buildings that were built when we were a city of 800,000 people, and we are thriving. We had thriving neighborhoods. I guess one of my questions, and that has been brought up from my constituents in the past week, has been, how do we? Is there a way that we can reconcile the magnet school treatment, the sort of the school choice within SLPS that is happening? So directly within the public schools, we've got a lot of magnet schools, and I know that some of this directly ties back to the desegregation program. But is there room within the current law for us to be reevaluating gifted school programs? Can we sort of decentralize those gifted student programs or more specialized type of programs back into neighborhood schools? I realize these are really big questions, and the current topic is these direct school closures, but is that something that you could speak to?
So first of all, the short answer is you kind of already answered the question. The desegregation agreement is a law that we have to follow until the district becomes what is called unitary, which means that segregation no longer exists in the way that it did before. There are targeted dollars that come to support those programs. I think there's some options to have a discussion around it, but the decentralization of all of the magnet school programs could not happen per the desegregation law. We still are under the desegregation law and the federal guidelines as it relates to that. And so the short answer is no, we cannot. We look at some programs to look at some decentralization of some of those some of those programs or some of those students in other schools. I think some of that could likely take place, but you mentioned two programs, the gifted program that could not happen in. It was specifically part of the desegregation agreement. Although, just for the record, we have gifted students in all of our schools. You just have a large concentration, 100% concentration in two schools, Mallinckrodt and Kennard. But you have gifted students, small numbers, don't get me wrong, 5 or 6 students here, 2 or 3 students here in almost every one of our schools. But once families realize that they can go to Kennard or Mallinckrodt, they go to those two schools by choice. They could stay in their own school, but they have a choice to go, and the desegregation agreement forces that to occur.
Okay, I thank you. I appreciate that. I don't want to, simplify the issues that we're dealing with and the history of segregation into our neighborhoods and our schools. Is that, but that was one of the questions raised, and so I wanted to get an answer publicly on there. One of the comments that I heard come up kind of again and again at the school board meeting the other night was the fact that the school board will be voting on closures first and then determining a plan of what to do with the buildings afterwards. Is just trying to think about that, is especially as some of the aldermen who are on, who are aldermen who represent some of the schools that are recommended for closure. Is there an urgency to need to decide on the closure before we decide what happens to those buildings? Is there a timeline that we have to meet on this, or is there a possibility of waiting until we have a better idea of what those buildings could be used for?
So there has been some conversation relative to buildings, not officially because we can't do anything until the board makes a decision to look to vote. And so it's, what comes first, the chicken or the egg in terms of that? I mean, do we find a location or use for the building before we make a decision? Is that contingent upon making a decision, or is that an isolated piece? But there has been conversations, some with persons on this screen, relative to buildings, and some with outside parties as well. As you know, there are three things the board can discuss in closure, or would be real estate, personnel, and legal. The buildings fall in two of those categories. And so it's only so much I am willing to say about the buildings, because some of it has to do with real estate and costs and those kinds of things, or MOUs around that. And some of it has to do with the legal requirements in terms of that. But some conversations have taken place, not with every single building. I want to be clear about that. But with some buildings, we have had some conversations. There's not a rush to do this, but there's a rush to make sure that we are able to set up to be able to accommodate the 2,000 kids that likely will be transferred as we deal with staffing, as we deal with transportation, as we deal with a number of different things. In the past, some boards have waited until March or April to make these decisions, and it puts everybody in a tailspin. The idea of doing it early gives us the opportunity to plan, to do exactly what you talked about in terms of looking at that building. If we make a decision in April and we're still talking about buildings, then I have only a short period of time to try to leverage relationships to put somebody in those buildings. Because like you, we want to make sure that those buildings don't become eyesores in neighborhoods as they have been in the past. That is a reality. Can't walk away from that. But we want to do a better job of being stewards of those buildings as we leave those buildings, such that they can be utilized. We are doing that in some unique places right now, and we want to try to continue that. But the short answer is there is a time period, and the time period of making a decision is impacted by the secondary decisions that we have to make, and the buildings obviously play a large part in it.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I think the last question I have, again, as someone whose ward is, we have a strong parochial school in my ward. We have a strong charter school in the ward. The public school that it does actually fall within the boundaries of the 8th ward is not a neighborhood school at this point either. Has anyone, and this is maybe a bigger question than just for you, but has anyone mapped out sort of where are students, what schools are they going to, what are the bus routes that folks, because my understanding of the school system in St. Louis City is that kids are all over the place and they're moving all throughout the city, whether they're going to charter schools, whether they're going to private schools or public schools. I know that we have buses when schools are in session. We have buses from every which direction, picking up one kid here, two kids here, and not combining those things. Is there anywhere that I can look for sort of a picture of where students are, where they're going?
Yes, we have that information for the St. Louis Public School. I do not have that information for charter schools, and I do not have that information for private and parochial schools. We run 272 buses every day throughout the city, 3 different tiers. You are correct. Part of the magnet school requirement is part of the desegregation requirement is that we do have to transport kids all over the city at the cost of about $25 million a year. And so part of this hopefully will reduce some of that. Don't know for sure because we don't know where kids will select, but you are 100% correct. It is a master in terms of trying to understand where everybody goes, because we do have this legacy of the desegregation agreement, and we have charters that have the ability, without any approval from the city or the district, to say if they can come in a particular neighborhood. And once they do, transportation has to be addressed to get them from point A to point B, because to your point, there are very few real neighborhood schools. Most of our kids, I think the largest number I looked at is about 75% of the kids at any particular school leave that school and can walk to the school. That means it was within their 6-block boundary. Most of the kids who go to schools have to travel past 1 mile to go to a particular school, because that's the sheer nature of what has happened in the city of St. Louis over time relative to the desegregation agreement and charter schools and the like. So it is a challenge. And I would encouraged, as an elected official, to ask the right questions relative to that, because I do think long-term, it is incredibly problematic for us to continue to be in this position long-term if the city is ever going to develop in a way that I know that all of you want to. It just does not happen in most small cities like St. Louis that this kind of thing occurs.
Sure. Okay. And so, and is there agreement under, is it part of the desegregation agreement that the that school buses have to be targeted just to one school or another, or is there a way that we could, I mean, just SLPS schools specifically, like, could we be combining some of these routes or some of the pickups with students? Is there a way to safely put to try to streamline a little bit of that and save the school district some money?
We have done everything in our power to do that, and that's why we have 272. We are having some conversations with charter schools to see if there's a possibility for us to leverage each other, because in some cases, kids are being dropped off at one school, and another bus from a charter school drops the kid off at another block. And so we have started discussions right before the pandemic around consolidating some transportation such that we could, number one, reduce cost, and number two, be more efficient. So that conversation is taking place with two of the larger charter organizations in the city, not with all of them, only with two. But we have done everything in our power to be as efficient as we can. But we have to, no matter what happens, by law, if a kid wants to live in South St. Louis and go to North St. Louis, we have to pick up that kid and do that. That's the law. We have to provide transportation for kids.
Right. Well, thank you, Dr. Adams. Again, thank you so much for your time today, for coming to our meeting, for coming and speaking to a body that does not have jurisdiction over the school district, but we are deeply invested in our students and our kids. And thank you for your long committed service to St. Louis Public Schools. So thank you, Mr. Clerk, or Mr. Chairman. That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Evans.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I am glad to have the opportunity to speak with Dr. Adams in regards to some of the school suggestions that he had. And I am just curious. Have I ever spoken with you, Dr. Adams?
No, ma'am.
Are you aware of the schools that are in my ward that are slated for closing?
Yes, ma'am.
Which ones are those?
Sumner and Hickey.
And Farragut.
And Farragut, I'm sorry, yeah. Sumner, Hickey,
That's
and
okay. I have 3 schools, the last public schools that are in my ward that are slated for closing. And I'm a little bit upset that I was not included in the consideration for these closings. When I heard that you had consulted community leaders and aldermen, and I'm saying, well, who were those individuals? I certainly wasn't included, and I have 3 schools slated for closing in my ward. So, I have your 38-page documentation of what you used to select the closing of these buildings. And there are some discrepancies in there where some of my schools did not get the amount of points that they should have gotten. Number one was you had Hickey School slated as a 114-year-old building. Someone had to tell you, no, that's not correct. You need to change that. It's 54 years old. So that's a big difference in a 114-year-old building and 54 years old. So we lost points on that. And I don't think you considered that. Also, the attendance. When you compared our attendance of what we have now compared to what Desi had in the 2015-2016 school year, you said we had 293. Desi said we had 185. Now, we lost points on that because you said we did not make gains. We did make gains. From 185 to 214, that's not a minus. That's an increase. So here again, I ask you, which of these scores did you use in scoring my school? I am tired of the city dismantling the fourth ward. We've got millions of dollars of development that's coming in this area. And you're taking my schools, my last 3 St. Louis public schools. I am a product of the St. Louis public school system. From kindergarten to high school. I started out kindergarten at Bates School. I attended Carr School. I attended Franklin School. I attended O'Fallon Technical High School, product of the St. Louis public school system. You cannot close my schools in the fourth ward. I just want to know. I feel slighted that I was not included in your decision making. And a lot of other people, were your teachers included? Were parents included? I know the answer to that, but I'm just throwing that out there. And were all of the aldermen who have schools closing in their wards, did you consult them?
So Alderwoman Evans, on 11/16, we email your office. We got a call back from the city. My secretary called you while you were in the line, taking care of some business.
Wait a minute. Let me write this down. When did you,
Yes,
on
ma'am.
what date? What did you say?
11/16, you received the email that afternoon to set up a meeting. We got a call back from the city, that's the person who manages the alderman's records and stuff. My
You got a
secretary,
call back from whom?
from whoever manages the secretary, I guess, for the alderman. We got a call back, got your direct number. My secretary called you. She indicated she spoke to you.
Okay, what number?
Whatever number was your number. My secretary is not in my office right now, but she called and spoke to you while you were in line paying taxes or covering some bill. And she spoke to you. You indicated you would call back. We never got a call back. We called back again that afternoon to try to set up a meeting with you, but we never got a call back, Alderwoman.
Wait a minute. If you called me on my personal number and I said I would call you back and you said you called me back.
No, I said you said you would call us back. We did not get a call. Nevertheless, the bottom line is we did try to make an attempt to reach out to you. I apologize that we did not get an opportunity to do so. I did speak to every single
attempt, if that's true, and you're closing 3 of my schools? One attempt?
We tried on 3 different occasions, but nevertheless, I apologize.
Okay, what were the other 2 occasions?
The email twice and the phone call. Email once and phone call twice.
Which email did you use? I have 3 emails.
We use the city's email number, and then that is the number that's the email we use. The email address that we used. The number was 712-2193.
That's my personal number.
Yes, ma'am.
If you call that number, I call you back. I will call.
Ms. Evans?
What was the person's name that called me? I can look it up and see if she did.
Alderwoman Evans, again, I want to apologize for not speaking to you personally. I don't have a problem meeting with you prior to the meeting on Tuesday to give you every opportunity to give me any kind of feedback as it relates to what's happening in your ward. I did take in consideration the Hickey data. We have made the adjustment. The score did increase from 46 to 51, I think it was, 45 to 56 to 51. So that the document you have has been updated. I publicly said that on Tuesday. You are correct. There was an error as it relates to numbers, and there was an error as it relates to the year of the school. So I did correct all of that information, and we did update the document. I think you're on mute, Alderwoman. You're on mute.
The score increased from what number to what number?
It is now 51.
And it was what?
46.
But yet still, some of the schools that you have not recommended for closing have numbers and scores far less than what my schools have. Why don't you close those?
As I said earlier, we were making every attempt to try to address some of the intricacies of the city. Example would be a school like Jefferson, where the housing development is being renovated. We've had constant conversation with Urban Strategies. In the next year, families will be moving back into that area. While the score might be lower than the score of your school, one of the schools in your ward, there's a fixed neighborhood that supports that school, that's stable, that's presently being renovated, that will have immediate need in the next 6 to 12 months.
Friends keep telling friends about guaranteed acceptance whole life insurance from Colonial.
That's just one example.
With this coverage, your premium.
Sorry, my papers got.
Mature men and to find out.
But 46 to 51.
Yes, ma'am.
And you still want to close my schools.
Alderwoman, since I did not have an opportunity to talk to you, I don't have a problem setting up a time over the next 24 hours to meet with you personally.
Okay, I would like to set up that appointment, and you let me know what's convenient for you.
My secretary
as long as it doesn't interfere with the Board of Aldermen's committee, my Board of Aldermen's meetings.
Yes, ma'am. You'll get a call right after this meeting.
Is that all, Alderwoman Evans?
At this time, I may have some later.
Absolutely. Now we will move into public comment section of this hearing. Please listen adequately. After the presentation of any bill, any public hearing, the proponents of, we don't need to read that. A list of names and addresses of all persons who testify at a public hearing in support of or in opposition to any bill, and a copy of each written testimony submission shall be kept by the clerk as a public record and shall be available to the members of the committee and the members of the Board of Aldermen when they consider such legislation. Speakers will be called in order that they appear on a list, which is in the same order in which they registered to speak. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. Each speaker will be called by name, the time to speak by the chair. Each speaker may speak on a topic of the hearing and related issues. A speaker will be given a 1 minute mark when they have reached a point. Each speaker will be told when their time is up. Once their time is up, the speaker is to stop talking unless the chair gives them additional time. Any participant may leave written comments by sending them directly to the clerk of the Board of Aldermen, Mr. Terry Kennedy, at kennedyt@stlouismo.gov, or by calling 314-589-6845 to make arrangements. The first person that is on a list to speak is Gloria Nolan.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I have a written statement. Did you want me to read that for Ms. Nolan? Or do you want to wait till the end?
In the interest of time, you can email that statement to the members of the committee and or the members of the Board of Aldermen.
Will do.
Thank you. Terrell Manning.
Good afternoon. I'm Tyrell Manning, a fall 2019 What's Next SLPS Power Builder. I'm here today representing We Power's 2020 What's Next SLPS cohort. The cohort has worked diligently this year, starting in June, working during a global pandemic to reimagine school closures. This cohort has completed over 70 one-on-ones, 12 virtual house meetings, 7 research actions, 1 issues assembly, with the effort of centering the voice of communities impacted by school closures. They have spoken to parents, teachers, grandparents, neighbors, school counselors, aunts, uncles, and business owners, and will continue to speak to community as we work to uplift their freedom dream for education in St. Louis. This intentional work of deep listening is how we build an equitable society and a world that uplifts the future of this city. We have come to you today because, as you've heard, our elected board asks that we come to our elected officials and speak on the topic of school closures. SLPS is currently considered voting on Tuesday to close 10 schools in wards that you serve. I am curious to know if our alder people have been deeply consulted. The superintendent has presented the board an upgraded plan of the 10 objectives, which are not robust. You can visit, you also saw them today, visit them on their website, but have you been made aware of what will really happen to these vacant buildings in your wards? The last thing we need is more vacant, empty buildings in St. Louis, especially North St. Louis. What is the impact on parents, teachers, and above all, children? Has the school told you how much money they're going to save from closing these buildings and what will honestly happen to that money? Here in St. Louis, over the last couple of years, we at the people were asked to vote for something as simple as a soccer stadium. We were even asked to vote for the logo. But right now, the school district is rushing a vote to close schools and nobody is truly clear on what the plan really looks like. I have personally experienced the impact of changing schools multiple times, schools merging because the airport expanded, going to a new school, the social and educational struggles that were amplified because of that, and no one considered what that meant for me as a young person. We are asking you, the aldermen, that you support us and support us in getting SLPS to delay the vote and improve the plan. We ask SLPS to show us a real timeline of how this will unfold. Just as you all as elected officials cannot do anything without consulting your constituents, the people that voted you into office, we ask that you do the same to our school board and support us in no plan, no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning, and I appreciate you being on time. School board member Natalie Val.
Good afternoon. I had written a statement I will just share with you all. Thank you for your attention in the matter of school closures, and thank you to Chairman John Collins Muhammad for the invitation. I come to you today not as a school board member, but as an activist and a resident of the 22nd Ward near Natural Bridge and Goodfellow in North St. Louis. Our public schools serve all students, and we are expected to absorb the trauma those students suffer. We're often asked for wraparound services to solve the problems the rest of our government causes. The decision to close and consolidate schools rests squarely on the district and the Board of Education, but we would not be doing our job if we didn't advocate for our SLPS students and families outside our direct sphere of influence regarding the external factors that impact their education. We can't close schools, move on, and expect our educational issues will be solved. Our city government functions often unwittingly via systemic racism. Compared to the rest of Missouri school districts, St. Louis City residents face the highest consequences when they're unable to afford their property taxes. A brutal asset forfeiture system imposed by the state legislature, which since 1971 has ripped homes from 100 or more citizens every year, primarily North Side. Unreasonable fines from the building division are thrust upon low-income homeowners, primarily North Side, for inability to afford home repairs. Approximately 1,600 people per year, primarily North Side, are arrested for little more than the inability to afford new tags or tickets for broken taillights. Our local government is steadily penalizing poverty with more wealth extraction. And this often happens in communities where wealth is the scarcest, creating more trauma for our schools to address. We seem insufficiently aware of the source of our revenue, which is people. And whether the people hit hardest, primarily North Side, are truly getting the same services we offer those with more comfortable socioeconomic status. The high vacancy rates, lack of investment, struggling neighborhood economies, and closure of schools would indicate that they're not. The answer is not simply more funding, it is a more equitable funding source, and I would like to ask the committee to explore some creative solutions, considering things like a moratorium on TIFs, reparations in the form of property tax relief or abatements for owner-occupied African-American homes in economically depressed neighborhoods, suspension of building violations on fines on owner-occupied properties for code infractions that do not directly threaten a neighboring structure, and a moratorium on opening new charter schools. We need to make equitable distinctions, and we must stop taking resources out of our most neglected neighborhoods. I welcome further conversation on any of these concepts as a citizen, and as a board member, I look forward to working with this committee to ensure SLPS and St. Louis City move forward together with a unified emphasis on the future. Thank you again for forming this committee and for having this meeting and inviting me.
Thank you, School Board Member Natalie Val. Ben Conover.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ben Conover, and I'm a resident of the 8th Ward. I wanted to take this opportunity to address the committee at this time when the difficult situation facing our public schools has created a dire reality. SLPS Superintendent Adams announced the proposal before the SLPS Board of Education to close and or consolidate 11 schools. Adams cited loss of enrollment and lack of funding to maintain operation of the buildings as two key factors for the recommendations. I expect we will hear many on this call criticize SLPS for these recommendations and make thinly veiled gestures at budget transparency, and I think this is misdirection. While I don't want to speak to any particular closures, such as Sumner High, which has historical importance, I do want to bring attention to how we got here in the first place. In the 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for SLPS, CFO and Treasurer Angie Banks cited $14.7 million of property tax revenue the school district missed out on due to the tax increment financing, and a further $2.1 million lost to property tax payments. In total, SLPS missed out on $35.8 million in tax revenue, a staggering amount and one that should cause significant pause. That $35.8 million is money that SLPS cannot use to keep schools open, improve children's education, pay teachers a living wage, and so much more. And that's just 1 year. While I recognize that the goal of TIFs and tax abatements is roughly reduce property tax revenue now for increased property tax revenue in the future, that doesn't encompass the whole situation, but we'll go with that. That does nothing to help our school district in crisis now. And frankly, I would question whether we even make up that revenue in the long run, or most of the projects in question, most of the projects in question need these sort of instruments. The approval of unnecessary corporate welfare is harming our city's children immeasurably and has helped bring us to the crisis the district faces today. It's time for the board to take responsibility for their contribution to this mess and fix it. Now to address enrollment. While our city needs to come together to address depopulation, a central factor in the loss of enrollment in SLPS is the proliferation of charter schools. Private, unaccountable organizations who, when held accountable, are revealed to be committing fraud, are siphoning money out of our children's schools into their own charter school coffers. We need to stand up against this market-based approach to education and defend public education as a public good for all St. Louisans. We need to be aware of the whataboutisms and conversations about budget transparency from groups like WePower, who are backed by organizations like Opportunity Trust and other charter school pushers. They are part of the problem, not the solution. It's time for the board to do its part in addressing the dual crises of corporate welfare and school choice approaches to education. I hope you will do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you, Ben. William Suggs. William Suggs.
Alderman, that's another letter that I had to read, so it's going to be emailed to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Alexis Lane.
Hello, everyone. I am at school right now, so if a child pops in, they are doing dismissal and saying hello. Hello, good afternoon, members of the committee. I thank you for allowing me time today to speak with you all, and Dr. Adams, thank you for joining us. I first want to state that I live in the 25th Ward. However, I work at Monroe Elementary School, which is just 5 minutes from my home and resides in the 20th Ward. I'm joining now live from my planning period. Now we're in dismissal time. I spend my days with rambunctious second graders who are currently in their gym, playing games and running off some pent-up energy. I work at Monroe Elementary School and have for 2 years now. Prior to this, I was at Ashland Elementary School in North City, which turned into a consortium school. I was displaced due to this decision, and I quickly made Monroe my home, started a basketball team here, and was welcomed in by wonderful staff and students. My partner, Isaac, and I have made a wonderful life here in Dutchtown. We are as committed as we can possibly be to this neighborhood. We are both teachers in SLPS. He works at Fanning Middle School, coaches JV basketball at Carnahan High School, and inspired me in many ways to start my basketball team. I'm sorry. So we have a few more dogs in this fight than most people. Although just as full of confidence and might our basketball team is. I'm sorry. Hold on, I'm speaking. Thank you. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you mute that, Ms. Moore? Sorry, since the news broke last Monday, I've activated my staff to not allow them to close our school down. We don't deserve it. Our staff doesn't deserve it. And most importantly, our students do not deserve to endure the extreme trauma that will result from being permanently displaced from what is for most of them their one solid ground to stand on. Our petition to keep Monroe alive currently has over 900 signatures in 1 week. I am writing today with many concerns, the first of all being the obvious destruction that would come in many ways to our neighborhood should 3 SLPS schools shut down and remain abandoned. And I am also speaking today extremely concerned by the seeming favoring of charter options that have been allowed and enthusiastically welcomed into our city and our neighborhood. I have been digging into the archives of one specific charter option, Kairos Academies, which was allowed to open up in the 2019-2020 school year. Of course, we may know that this charter option was opened up by Jack Cruson and Gavin Schiffers, both former TFA members with just 2 years of experience in education and not experience in the Dutchtown neighborhood, I might add. I will not dwell for too long on the obvious conflicts of interest that live in the weeds of allowing the mayor's son to open a charter school less than 1,000 feet from a St. Louis public school that serves the same grade. In digging through the archives for this school, I have located letters from aldermen and women stating enthusiastic support for their opening and citing an overabundance of students in Dutchtown to go around. Obviously, the latter must be untrue because here we are in 2020, and the stated reason for Monroe and Fanning Middle School being listed is the opposite. There are not enough students to go around. Mr. Kahn and Ms. Spencer, I am addressing this to you as my alder people and the alder people of my school and where I live for Fanning and Monroe. I have to question the commitment to the public neighborhood schools in your ward. Do you enthusiastically support Monroe Elementary School, Fanning Middle School, and Carnahan High School? Are you, as stated regarding Kairos, willing to support in any way you can the schools in your ward? We service at Monroe over 230 students in grades PK through 6th grade, and I'm sure you're aware that there is an overlap between the grade that Kairos serves, 6th grade, and the grades that both Fanning and Monroe serve. Kairos was allowed to open up less than 500 feet from our back door at Monroe Elementary School, and they were praised in one of the 2 letters for canvassing the neighborhood, walking door to door and recruiting 6th graders to leave their public school option and come to Kairos Academy, an experimental charter school. I won't take up too much more of your time. I also know I don't have any time. I am really coming to you today as a frustrated educator and resident. This will be my 3rd school in 4 years in this district due to displacement. While on the surface and on Facebook and for optics, we may be on the same page in this fight to keep St. Louis public schools alive, to keep our neighborhood schools alive, but clearly digging into the archives, we are not. Dr. Adams, I am urging you to reconsider the placement of Monroe Elementary School on this list. I know that the pressures to make these difficult decisions for you are also tied to the lack of support from our city overall. So I can sympathize with you on that. I am also calling on those who represent the wards at Monroe, Carnahan, and Fanning, and all of these schools placed on these lists to speak up enthusiastically on their behalf. These buildings are more than just that. These neighborhood schools dedicate their lives to educating the next generation of Black and brown students in the city. They are absolutely necessary. Our students are not guinea pigs. They deserve a quality, stable, well-funded educational experience and all of your enthusiastic support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Emily Hubbard.
Hi, here, you can see my face as well. Thank you, Chairperson. I have 3 children at Merrimack Elementary in Dutchtown. It is our neighborhood school that we walk to. And I have 1 child now at McKinley who I guess we would be driving if there weren't a pandemic. We have been blessed by our experience at our neighborhood school. I was disturbed to see it on the larger list of schools. But really, I'm so frustrated listening to the aldermen and women ask Dr. Adams things he's been saying over and over. I started paying attention in March because my children go to a neighborhood school. And if you had been paying attention, you would know the answers to the questions you're asking. We know that this is a quick decision because he didn't release the names because he didn't want students to not go to school. Can you just pay attention, please? And on the question of the gifted schools, can we rewrite the law since 2 of the gifted schools have 60% white children and 70% white children in a school district that is 13% white? I am so frustrated about that. It's bad. And my daughter at McKinley has no Black teachers, when at Merrimack she had so many and she had Black peers. And I know, Alderman, that you are not in charge of the school district, but when you do tax abatements, you hurt us. And I need you to be on our side. These are my children. These are all of our children. And I need, can you pay attention, please? I know, Ms. Spencer, you've gotten us a sign at Merrimack for all the times even the police, but people speed on our street. And I know you've done like the block things for Frable, but you haven't been paying attention if you have to ask the same questions. And it's really disappointing. Our school has been such a blessing to us. The teachers have stayed for a long time. There's stability there. And every student should have that. And I hope that the consolidation plan increases the ability and the likelihood for that to happen. But please pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hubbard. Mr. Burns, President of the Northside Community Housing Incorporated.
Thank you, Chairman John Collins Muhammad. Thank you also to Clerk Terry Kennedy and to you, Dr. Adams. Good to see you. I am the president of Northside Community Housing, which is in opposition of the closing of Farragut Elementary, Hickey Elementary, as well as Sumner, which are all located in the Ville and the Greater Ville community. The decision to close these schools, we consider it to be counterproductive to the redevelopment plans that are already underway in this community, as well as the residual effects of the upcoming construction on the Geospatial Center just a mile away. Now, Northside Community Housing has been in existence since 1977. And what we do is we provide high quality housing, which is affordable to low to moderate income households, as well as we create opportunities for them to become successful in their lives as they help us to revitalize the community. Now, the Ville community, which these schools are located, is very important to us. And since I know you, Dr. Adams, I know exactly what your love is to New Orleans, and especially the French Quarter. And you know what happened with that hurricane that came into the French Quarter? Well, the fact that this recommendation is being made about closing our schools in this area feels like a hurricane to us. And one thing that I want to talk to about when it comes to closing the schools, we're getting ready to build in cooperation with some other developers over 100 homes in the Greater Ville, the Ville, and the Jeff Vanderloop community. And I don't believe any of the data that you have really reflects that. And I'll also say that Alderman John Collins Muhammad has some development taking place just north of Natural Bridge. That's also going to be the glue to really help to redevelop this community. But from a real estate perspective, the driver of home ownership is schools. And the knowledge of what we're doing is out there in the general public. So if the issue is that you're looking for more tax base, we're building more homes. You know, that's just a fact of what it is that we're trying to do. So if it's an economic situation, we can help you with that. If it's coming about resources to communities, we have the Ville Collaborative that's helping us to redevelop and provide services. As a matter of fact, we have a big event taking place December the 19th for a Christmas activity because all of the nonprofits, the churches, and the business owners are coming together for that purpose. But Northside Community Housing is here to help. We are helping to develop the community. We feel like this decision to close the schools is a bit short-sighted because you're not taking into consideration some of the upcoming economic advantages of this plan. You're not taking that into consideration. So I'll say here lastly, as a product of Williams Elementary School that was closed, a product of Beaumont High School that was repurposed, you know, a product of O'Fallon Technical High School that's also been repurposed, and as a former employee of St. Louis Public Schools working under your tutelage, even drafted some letters on your behalf. I implore you to reconsider this recommendation and allow us to work with you and the rest of the community to bring these schools back to their rightful place. I thank you for the opportunity, Chairman Muhammad.
Ms. Julia Allen.
Thank you, Chairman Muhammad. My name is Julia Allen. I am 71 years old. I am a product of public school education. I have lived in the 4th Ward all of my life. I have systematically watched, not necessarily this school board, but every school board before this one, to systematically close down schools in North St. Louis. You people are furthering or widening the Delmar divide. If you talk about equity, then you need to reinvest in our schools in North St. Louis. I understand there's an issue about those schools not being safe or this, that, and the other. But when you look at the history of these schools, and the kids that they're educating, it's always our kids that have to be bused, relocated. And it just does not make sense. This has been an ongoing problem. We know, or at least I know, that there are other powers that be behind all of this. Because number one, they want to see charter schools in our community. There is no data that says charter schools are better than public education. I support public education. I think charter schools drain the resources that can go for our schools. It's just a shame that in 2020, we are still fighting this doggone fight about equity for North St. Louis. And if you don't think this is an equity issue, you're just living in another world. In support of what Mike Burns said, we have $80 million worth of development coming into our neighborhood. We have organizations outside of our neighborhood, like Shakespeare in the Streets, people who don't even live in our community, who are supporting us in keeping our schools open. I would say this would be another slap in the face of people in North St. Louis if you close another school in North City. I looked at the reading numbers. Some of the schools you are proposing to consolidate with the schools in North City have lower reading averages than the schools in our own wards. This is not right. It's time that somebody has the courage to do the right thing. Thank you.
Right on time, Ms. Allen. Thank you. Mr. James Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed, for allowing me to speak. I'd like to echo what Mr. Burns and Ms. Allen just said. I concur with what they just said. And as a product of public school and Dunbar Elementary and Bashan, I am really concerned about the closure of Dunbar. I've been talking with some people in the area that's trying to keep Dunbar alive, and we came up with a term that's called the trifecta. You have a unique situation there. You have Dunbar, Bashan, and Harris Education Center right there close to each other, within walking distance. I think it should be looked at and see about making a mini campus or whatever you want to call it. The NGA is going to bring funds to that area to revitalize that area. I grew up in that area. Dunbar, Starter, Thomas, walked those streets. Saw the changes that Mrs. Allen's been talking about. We need to stand up for what's right. To allow these schools to close is not doing justice. I've served time in the military and come back to this type of behavior. It just doesn't make sense. All in all, I would love to start a conversation on the trifecta, which is Dunbar, Bashan High School, and Harris Education Center. You're talking about teaching the children, teaching each other. You've got the cornerstone right there. It's a trifecta, perfection. Again, being new to this forum, I'm overhyped for this type of event. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm all in for change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Matt Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Matt Davis. I'm a resident of the 28th Ward and a parent of 2 current SLPS students. I've been following school consolidation in the city for years. My first involvement was back in 2009 when the Special Administrative Board had a proposal for very widespread school closings across the city. That was an excruciating and painful process. Some neighborhood groups, like the one I was involved in at the time, were able to persuade the SAB to keep open some of those proposed schools. But the message then was very clear. If this city didn't make widespread change, we were destined to repeat history. And that brings us back today. As Dr. Adams said, this current process has actually been going on for at least over a year. It actually began before the SAB was dissolved. They kicked the can down the road, whether that was courageous or cowardice, to the elected school board. And the elected school board has taken it up in a very open process. There's been feedback sessions, there's been reports, they've talked about it. What they did keep secret was the list of names, and Dr. Adams has articulated the reason why, because it's traumatic, as you've seen from the people affected by it, and he didn't want that to affect the current school year. I guess my question for this committee is, where have you been? Why is this suddenly seeming to be news to you when this was well publicized, well documented, and well discussed throughout the community? You know, what Dr. Adams didn't mention was that in March, when the process was stalled, SLPS was forced at that time to go into an emergency mode. In essence, they became a network of emergency food pantries across the city, because part of the tragedy that goes on every day is that if thousands of kids in SLPS don't go to school, they don't eat. At the same time they transition to virtual learning, another tragedy, thousands of kids in the city didn't have access to technology or access to internet. And my question for the Youth and Education Committee, the Board of Aldermen, where have you been? Why weren't you holding hearings back in March and May? I looked at your record, and the only thing that you did last spring was to pass an ordinance that was written by a political consultant with ties to dark money groups out of Washington, D.C. to pass a property tax increase. You sold that property tax increase that it was supposed to fund early childhood education. Well, guess what? That was misleading. The state statute doesn't allow that money to be used for early childhood education. The only thing that money can go to is nonprofits. The same nonprofits who pushed that before your committee and you passed with a rubber stamp because they were well-connected, well-funded, and had political consultants to push it through. So my hope is that now that those political consultants are happy, will you listen to us? I hope that you will acknowledge that you have been derelict in your duties to children of St. Louis Public Schools and use this committee to focus on their needs. Thank you. Sorry I went over time.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Miguel Alexander. You're still muted.
Sorry about that. Again, I'm gonna let Carla, my wife, talk, but we will say this, that the NGA is gonna be done with in 2025. For whatever reason, they took away a lot of people's houses, forced them out of their houses. Now they're trying to take away our school, force the kids out of the school. Mm-hmm. This is not acceptable, but I'm gonna let her continue.
Thank you, Con. We just want to say during this COVID-19 pandemic, it is without a doubt that something seriously is wrong and our schools are in need of intervention. There's an underlying factor that we feel the reason Dunbar Elementary School and our other schools on the north side in the city of St. Louis have been recommended to close again. Intervention is urgently needed. We're requesting the committee, along with your colleagues on the Board of Aldermen, to put a stop to the system of pulling children away from our traditional neighborhood schools and routing them to charter schools. We're also requesting that the Board of Education, Dr. Adams, and would you all consider to delay this vote until the public can have an opportunity to review the population density map, the census that is coming out in April, and also the title should be, the public should be entitled to see the raw data that you determine the scores, because there's some discrepancies in those scores. We would like to see a study conducted to reflect, to see, well, if the population in the city has decreased, why has the crime increased? One of the school board members made a good point, said many families do not want to even attend our schools because of the crime. And then we want to know, why isn't Dunbar considered when knowingly there's the NGA coming, it's been discussed, and the position that they're in, the landscape is so unique over here with the elementary, high school, and the college together. It has to be considered. Why isn't housing and the development, the NGA and everything considered for our school to stay open? And another thing is that we often have heard that resources have been blocked and not allowed to be implemented in the schools, proposals denied or letters unanswered. And we want to know, Dr. Adams, have you purposely blocked programs and from the schools because you knew you were going to close the schools? A lot of things that we put into our schools attract students to our schools, but when the programs are blocked, then that impedes its progress. And then we want everyone here, Dr. Adams, the committee, Board of Aldermen, all those people, all those officials. We would love for you all to start being honest with the residents, because we want to share it with everybody. We have done research and we want to know, is this another urban renewal move? And we would like to thank you for your time.
Yeah, they're trying to redevelop our area and push
It
us.
is your time, Mr. Alexander. I apologize, sir. Thank you so much. Our last speaker is Ms. Cotton. Ms. Collins Smith, I'm sorry.
Hi, thank you, Chairman Collins Mohammed, members of the Board of Aldermen, Dr. Adams, for your time, and thank you to our residents in South City who attended and are listening and spoke this afternoon here. My name is Amanda Colon Smith. I'm the Executive Director at Dutchtown South Community Corporation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that serves neighborhood development and community revitalization in the South Side. Doing similar work to Mr. Michael Burns, who spoke earlier in Northside, in the Ville neighborhood. And we submitted a letter, a public letter on behalf of our organization to the school board, covering some of the points that have been mentioned today. I want to read just some select pieces that I think are really relevant for the Board of Aldermen and for our elected officials in terms of the process and for collaboration in really taking some time to address what is at hand here. So as a community development corporation that serves 3 schools directly impacted by the plan currently under consideration, we respectfully ask that SLPS postpone the planned vote for the vote on the 15th by at least 6 months. I apologize, those are my kids. The vote be postponed for at least 6 months in order to allow, number 1, additional sufficient review of the comments that have been received from the public, 2, additional public meetings to include those directly impacted at those schools on the current plan to shape alternatives, and 3, the release of a revised plan that details the costs and benefits, fiscal and otherwise, to students and community for each of the sites that have a proposed change. I understand, we've talked about, how that has to be evaluated, but our organization promotes community engagement and having those direct participants involved in plans for their community and for their school. Carnahan and Monroe Elementary are located directly in our service area, and many of the children who live in our service area also attend Fanning Middle School. The proposed closure of these schools would disproportionately impact Black children who live in South City. Our community is comprising of some of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city, and DSCC works with residents and stakeholders to advance racial equity in our community. We are vigilant about recognizing new policies and actions that magnify racial disparities and threaten the racial equity in our community. In terms of collaborating with the board here, accordingly, we ask that SLPS allow additional time and collaborate with the community to find more equitable solutions. For instance, SLPS and the community should explore ideas such as co-locating social service providers, job training, or other alternative programs. Just recently, the city released an equitable economic development study that called for a center for job training in Marine Villa. And so we want to see that there would be time to consider putting those alternative plans together in lieu or in concert with the current school closure plan. So there are lots of different things that our neighborhood organization has promoted: a community development corporation, a community development plan, the Gravois Jefferson Historic Neighborhood Plan. The city has equitable economic development study, and those things should be lined up together to look at opportunities to avoid closure where possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins Smith, and thank you to the members of the public who gave remarks. Our superintendent has a meeting that he is late for, but I will allow him to address and give closing remarks if he desires. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, I just want to thank the committee for giving me an opportunity to share the information. I am available at any time to talk to anybody about anything. Our cell number is 541-1165. I'm available, as I said before, by text, email, or by my number, as I just indicated, to discuss any matter. Like you, I'm listening to all of the comments, and my hope and belief is that we will make the right decision in a timely way to support what's best for kids in this community. So thank you very much, Alderman. Thank you, all the persons as well, for giving me an opportunity to share with you and the public. Thank you. I'm going to jump off right now, if you don't mind, all the persons, so I could run to my next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Are there any remarks or comments for members of the committee?
Are you going to go down the line?
Now I'm going to start with you first, Alderman Gunther, because I like you.
Way out of order, Chairman. Way out of order. All right. Well, yeah, some comments. Obviously, I anticipated that Dr. Adams was going to have to leave, but had he had more time, I think that in the last three, with the public school board of education meeting that a lot of us watched on Monday, with some of the discussions that have been had through groups like We Power and some of the comments today. And I think that it would, behoove us to, as the committee, to directly reach out to Dr. Adams, like he said, and encourage him to put, give a little more time on this vote. Obviously, I think that's what the public has been asking for. And after the hearing that, the input we've just had, I think that there are a lot of things that still need to be addressed before the board votes on closing those 10 or 11 schools next week. Yes, I guess obviously reach out to Dr. Adams and the elected public school board. The other thing I was going to ask him, and maybe someone on this could clarify, someone else on the committee could clarify, but from what I took of the school board meeting was that they agreed to have one more public meeting before the vote was taken. So I think that it could be, and Dr. Adams said that if they did not vote on this next week and just did no action, then they would basically be putting a lot of the ideas they have for extra security, extra health, nurses at each school, a lot of the things they had in place would just stop. So I think we owe it to the work of Dr. Adams to be quick in, having public meetings on this over the next few weeks to work out some things. But at the same time, it does look like there are going to be some recommendations made that the school board will have to vote on closing something. So, anyway, stay tuned for it. As we'll go through anyone else's comments.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderwoman Rice.
Oh, you're just hopping around the list here, Mr. Chairman. Thanks. Thank you everyone for coming and speaking with us today. I think it's important, and it was the reason that this committee was created in the last year. It was a long time effort of Alderman Cone to even have a committee on education and youth matters at the Board of Aldermen. For too long, City Hall has been very disconnected from SLPS. And I hearing all of these concerns and looking to our responsibility as the Board of Aldermen when we look at the tax dollars that are flowing into SLPS. One of the things that I did when I came into office was we stopped doing tax abatements in the 8th Ward. They're not necessary here. They're not necessary in the Central Corridor. Development happens without them, and we are continuing to watch homes be revitalized and things be built here. Because we understand the effects that tax incentives have on our neighborhood schools, on our school district itself. It can't be me by myself, and I appreciate my colleagues who are also working towards those goals of evaluating projects and what their effect is on our city schools. I would love to have more clear input from SLPS representatives when it comes down to our tax incentives and what gets proposed in front of the Board of Aldermen. I will say we don't often hear from the SLPS representative that's supposed to weigh in on tax incentives when they come in front of us. And I think that's something that we would all greatly benefit from, is more direct information. When we look at when a project is coming through, what is that impact going to have? And it's a complicated tax structure in Missouri. It's not a one for one, a dollar comes off, a dollar leaves SLPS. It's a complicated formula. But I think for all of us to work better to understand that, and as we decide whether to approve or not approve projects, that's important. And sticking to our guidelines sticking to our guidelines when they say, you know, tax incentives are not available in certain areas, that we really hold to that. That is important for us as we move forward as a city to make sure that our public schools have the funding that they need. I guess the other question I have, I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, did you were you contacted by any members of the Teachers Union of AFT to speak today?
No, I was not, Alderwoman.
No, okay. All right, I was hoping to hear from the teachers union as well on their thoughts on this, but I guess that's all I have for right now. I thank you for all of the input today. I was present last fall at one of the SLPS listening forums at Roosevelt High School. A number of us have engaged in this process prior to now, you know, and there's always more that this committee can be doing. But as we're a new committee, I think we're working to connect those dots and try to figure out where we can be of best service to the city. So thank you for the hearing today, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here for your testimony.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Ingrassia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to hear from the public today and Dr. Adams in this committee. Wanted to echo the sentiments from my colleague from the 8th. One of the biggest issues that a lot of us have here at the Board of Aldermen is when tax incentive packages are being moved forward at the board. Sometimes there's just a few of us who are pushing back on that narrative, and having the support of the public, especially those who are involved at the school board level with SLPS, parents, teachers, people who are able to weigh in on those. There is one voting member on the TIF commission who usually is either the lone no vote or votes along with the TIF commission. And so that can be problematic in terms of us trying to make sure that we are allocating funding to the public school system to the best of our ability, being that most of the laws are at the state level under statute for regulation of the public schools. And I also am hoping that we can have a more robust conversation about why some private schools and charter schools are offering amenities to students in a way that uplifts them that aren't being offered by St. Louis City Public Schools, and what that looks like in terms of folding those types of initiatives into public school systems. I think Ms. Val recommended or mentioned the fact that as a society, we are failing kids a lot. And so sometimes, although it's not the job of the school district itself, having comprehensive wraparound services in schools is incredibly important if that's a place that kids are going every day. And so I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for your input. I look forward to continuing this conversation. It's obviously a complicated and emotional matter for us all. And no further comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like my colleagues, I want to thank everyone for coming and taking time out of their day. I know right now it's an incredibly stressful time for everyone. This pandemic has impacted everyone in some sort of way. And this is also, like my colleague Christine Ingrassia just said, that, or Alderwoman Ingrassia said that this is complicated and it's often emotional. I can't imagine being a student and having my school shut down. So, and you know, it's especially hard when you're a child during a pandemic. I do want to throw out some points here that I have listened to the feedback. We do have committee hearings for every incentives package that is approved by the Board of Aldermen. And that is something I just want to make people aware of. Again, I know it can be difficult for people to attend because they're during the day. Right now it might be a little easier because of Zoom. So people are more than welcome to come. In fact, we would love to have some more public input when it comes to these types of things. You know, it's hard now. I don't remember who said it, but it is hard now this isn't going to be an immediate fix on our end at the board. We do have very little to do with the school board. It is mostly through the locally elected school board, which is now independent, which is what I think most St. Louisans wanted. And then also the state. They also have, you know, public hearings as well, even on the state level. They travel around and go to different regions. There's also, I just want to address, I don't disagree on the overhaul that needs to happen for incentives. I do see it every week, and question my own votes on it from time to time. But I also think that it is not the end all be all on why we're in this situation. I think that there are a lot of different factors in this. Population loss, for sure, we just can't deny it. And I'm not a proponent for just having all these open school buildings just to have them, even though it's a brutal choice for anyone to make. But I think that we do need to acknowledge some of these other contributing factors like population loss. And then also another thing is the siphoning of students from charter schools. It just has to be acknowledged whether you are a school choice proponent or not. That is also a factor. And I appreciated someone who said, why are we closing the schools when we're allowing the charter school a new one to open? So I don't remember who said that, but I wanted to acknowledge that. But I think that this is a good hearing. I think that it's good for all of us to be involved and it's good just to hear from constituents and residents. We should always be very in tune with the people we represent. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank everyone who took the time to speak today and share your comments also over email. It's all very helpful. As my colleagues have said, when it comes to any authority we have over the school district, it's extremely limited, but obviously the educational system touches on so many of the things that we do make decisions on here at the board. And when we are facing population loss in the city of St. Louis and we're trying to attract new businesses, we have to look at the role of our school system in that. And so we are all deeply invested in our children and in our educational system. So I think it's important that we keep bringing these matters up to the board and finding ways for us to take more action. I think it's extremely important that we figure out how to prioritize shrinking resources right now, especially as we look at the inequities in our educational system. How do those play out? And again, how can we be prioritizing these shrinking resources, which I think is extremely difficult. And I definitely, feel for everybody, at the school board and the superintendent who has to be making these extremely difficult decisions, and especially for the students who, have very little say in what happens and happens to them. I do think I agree with Alderwoman Martin in terms of, our incentive reform. I think we need to do some in-depth analysis. I don't think it's a matter of just saying, we turn off all abatements and incentives and all of a sudden there's going to be a windfall of money into the school districts. That may be the case in certain instances, but I don't think we can overlook the fact that we're competing for large development projects with a whole bunch of other municipalities right here in our own region. And I think there's a large assumption that, if we got rid of incentives, that these projects would still happen. And I think we have to step back and look at that process and come up with a better analysis system and figure out how we do maximize those incentives that we can offer. I mean, in terms of, what does the city of St. Louis do to attract new business and new people into the city? Well, we've got to look at, what can we offer? And that does mean looking at what incentives are available and on the table and how do we maximize those tools for the benefit of our school system and our city. And that's not an easy question. It's not an either or, yes or no, all or nothing sort of situation. And I do think we have taken some steps, the map that the Alderwoman from the 8th referenced in terms of what incentives are available where. I think that's very helpful. And I think to the extent that aldermen are able to stick to that map, the more credibility it gives our entire incentive system. So I do think there are a lot of things that we can be doing. And I do look forward to having more of those conversations at the board and finding all of the ways possible that we can to support our children and our educational system. So thank you again for this opportunity today.
Hey, thank you so much, Alderwoman. Also, I want to thank the committee and I want to thank the superintendent for joining today. Again, I want to make sure that the public is fully aware that the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis has very little oversight and very little control over the St. Louis Public Schools District. Today's committee hearing was all about public participation and public engagement and a chance to hear all sides about school closures. I also think that when the decision to close any school in urban areas are never easy. And I think if you look at studies and you look at data, school closures are a part of an ongoing cycle that includes a disenfranchisement and a historical trend of disinvestment in areas and neighborhoods that have very little resources. People do not leave the city of St. Louis because of bad schools or failing school districts. People leave the city of St. Louis because of failing neighborhoods, and that has an effect on our school districts, in my opinion. But we have great schools in our community. We have great neighborhoods. I have two schools in my ward that I am very proud of, Ashland Elementary and Yateman Liddell Middle School, which does great work under the leadership of a good friend of mine's, Brother Ken Griffin and Dr. Melissa Nash, and they have built a successful coalition with the community and has become a community partner in the advancement of our neighborhoods. And I think we need to see more of that. Alderman Cone is back on. Alderman Cone, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I nothing that wouldn't already be reiterating some of the comments and sentiments expressed already by colleagues and by folks that were here to testify today. It is a very frustrating and disheartening process to go through. Population declines certainly play a loss. I can speak to the 25th Ward and the Dutchtown area, or at least the portion of Dutchtown that I represent. We don't have a single public school building that's being utilized as a public school in the neighborhood in my ward, in the 25th Ward. Even prior to my initial election, we had both Scruggs Elementary School and Cleveland High School closed. One was sold and the other one is still, finding a new life. But 30% of the young people in our neighborhood or 30% of the population in my ward and in the Dutchtown neighborhood is underneath the age of 18. So that's a challenge when you don't have school buildings within walking distance, or even in some cases that are even convenient. The 25th Ward goes from Gravois and Chippewa all the way down to Bates and Michigan, and from Compton and Gasconade down to Spring and Delore. It's a pretty large geographic area, and there's not one public school that's operating within that area. There's certainly schools on the periphery. I've worked with those schools to try and do what I can and support them, even though they're not in my ward. I have obviously teachers that live in my ward and principals as well. I try and support them and have conversations with them around what we can do better. I've worked with my time down here at the board, along with many of my colleagues that are on this committee, for incentive reform. I was chairing neighborhood development when we took the first major step towards incentive reform and trying to curtail, particularly with tax abatements, the issuance of those in areas and neighborhoods that don't need them, particularly in the central corridor. Those types of development incentives, should be squarely focused in North St. Louis and Southeast St. Louis City, where they're needed, and not, for projects in neighborhoods that have either seen investment or haven't, had the same kind of disruption or destabilization that other communities have. I think we've got a lot of work ahead. One of the reasons why I proposed even starting this committee at the board, and I guess kind of founding it or co-founding it, if you will, is that it provides the opportunity to be able to allow these conversations to take place, raise these concerns, and have greater citizen input in that process, and allow the board an opportunity to listen to not just St. Louis Public Schools. Education and Youth Matters was very intentional in terms of the naming of this committee, because we wanted to ensure that all, kind of the touch points, if you will, of young people in our community, are being have the opportunity to be discussed, reviewed, and collaborated with. One of the reasons, at least initially when I first started pitching this committee, when I first got elected, was that we have home-based daycares that have no, really oversight. There's no mechanisms to ensure that there's quality programming or care that's given in those home-based daycares. We have home-based daycares in every single neighborhood of the city, and so we have a lot of work to do, not only in this committee but as a city, towards making sure our kids are going to be given every opportunity to succeed in life. And so, again, I certainly appreciate all of the perspectives that were shared. I look forward to continuing the work with St. Louis Board of Public Education and with the superintendent. Appreciate his time here today. And certainly look forward to continuing the conversations in my ward and the neighborhoods that I represent in our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman. I also want to apologize to the president, President Reed. He was trying to access this online and he did, and he got kicked out, but I know he had a couple of comments, but I do want to thank him for his leadership. And he was instrumental in helping us get accreditation back to the district. So I want to appreciate him and also apologize for him not being able to speak, but I'm sure he shares the same concerns as all of us, that being members of the board in the public. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a request for previous roll?
Previous roll.
Been moving second, request for previous roll. Hearing no objections, the committee is adjourned. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you.